Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what is an extremely special week, and not only for OTTRED as a community globally, but for the content, somewhat appropriately, that we're going to be creating and putting out there that should shed light on a topic that I have heard so much about over the course of the last 18 months, and that I'm sure you have as well if you operate anywhere within what's largely encompassed as the horizon that constitutes broadcasting. We've got a number of amazing guests every single day for you across the course of this week. And we're starting off with the individual that actually ignited my awareness of this topic, somebody that has got strong opinions and is well qualified to share those opinions and frequently does on LinkedIn, Evan Shapiro, and an individual who I've developed a tremendous amount of respect for, but have known for a relatively short time, who is about to become a published author by Penguin Random House in the early part of 2025 on the creator economy. So I'm going to be playing my normal role as a dumb host and facilitating conversation, whilst Ankur extends intelligent questions to Evan about the creator economy. Guys, welcome to day one of the Creator Economy Week for the OTTRED community. Evan, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on as guest on the first day.
Thank you so much.
Ankur, do you want to kick off by just giving us an overview of why we're doing this week, what your book's going to be all about, and what your perspective of these constituent parts of the creator economy are? And we're going to turn to Evan and start to get some real perspective around what he sees with this growing creator economy.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Chris. This is it's such a pleasure being here, and I've learned so much from you in the short span that we've been working together. And I'm really happy that, Evan, I'm getting to talk with you today. I really look forward to this discussion. A quick note about myself. In the last, say, about 10 odd years, and a little more maybe, I've been working in the creator economy. Firstly, when I was working as the country manager for a YouTube multi-channel network, one of the largest ones based out of Europe, and I was heading the India market for them when I was, trying to work with a lot of creators on the YouTube channel itself. And then in the last 7 odd years, I've been working at Meta, where I was initially looking at building the creator partnerships for creators across multiple languages, and then I moved over to Singapore to head the Asia Pacific creator partnerships, and then to the US to head North America, Latin America. Now, during these last 10 years, I've had a chance to work with thousands and thousands of creators of all sizes, small, medium, large, and also in multiple language formats and all. And one thing that has always kind of piqued my interest is that these creators of all shapes and sizes are doing such a tremendous job connecting with the true fans on different platforms and all. But the overall structure or the overall, the path to growth for them seems to be kind of bittered with a lot of different obstacles, platform nuances. Platforms are changing, brands are getting more picky and choosy. There are so many different aspects to this that is making their life and livelihood really difficult. And so I took upon myself to kind of try and simplify the concept of the creator economy for all the stakeholders that are involved in it. And I came out with a framework called the 5C framework, where 1C is the creator, then you have the collaborators or the brands, then you have the channels or the platforms. The 4th C is the commerce C, which is where the creators can make money outside of just ad revenues. And the 5th C, which is in the center of everything, is the consumer, where people like you and me, anybody who's consuming content also sits. And all of these different 5 Cs are talking to each other and interacting and transacting with each other. So this is the concept of on which the book is built upon. And while we're talking about different aspects of the creator economy, I'd love to take this opportunity in this Creator Economy Week to talk about not only those different aspects, but specifically with Evan, talk about the overall creator economy and what does it mean, for emerging markets versus more developed markets, for the smaller creators, let's say the nano creators to the micro creators to the mega creators. How is it different for different stratas of, the creator ecosystem and all? So yeah, Great. This is where I am.
Thanks, Ankur. I'm looking forward to co-hosting this week with you. I'm sure that you'll extend some intellectually charged questions. I'm looking forward to them. Evan, do you want to introduce yourself quickly and then share your perspective on how this topic got your attention? Because it's something you speak about frequently.
Yeah. So if you've never heard of me before, which is fine, I'm called the Media Universe Cartographer because I take big pools of data and turn them into maps, actual practical maps of the media universe, but also take large reams of data that we get shot at us like a fire hose on a daily basis and turn them into much more digestible and actionable sets of insights. What's fascinating, I think, in context of this conversation is that I went in doing so, in morphing into the media universe cartographer, I really transferred my talents and my energies from the gatekeeper economy, where I was running networks and divisions of big corporate media, into the creator economy. So now I make my entire living via the creator economy with a Substack newsletter called Media War and Peace, which you can subscribe to right now. I'll wait. And but kind of even more fully with an audience that I have on LinkedIn, which is not massive, but incredibly energetic and loyal and passionate. And while not every dollar I earn comes in through a creator path, every dollar I generate is generated by the energy I'm able to create inside the creator economy through my conversation with my community, which would be a sixth C I might offer to Ankur. The consumer is usually part of a community. And I think the strength of any creator enterprise is typically dictated by the passion and loyalty and devotion that an artist can generate with a specific community. And I think what I would maybe kick the conversation off with would be, to say that I think the issues that many small creators have in the creator economy is that they are typically operating with the tenets of the creator economy that most people associate with the last era of media. So most people, when they think of the creator economy, they think of influencers. And influencers are really just a small subset of creators. I got my first introduction to the creator economy through comedians, with whom I've done a tremendous amount of work, who are almost always self-propelled individual enterprises who are doing live performance and booking it themselves. Sometimes they have a manager doing it for them. They're doing podcasts, they're selling merch, they're selling albums. They really have been, I think, them and musicians, some of the first great examples of how the creator economy could and should work. But I think the misperception that a lot of people have when they enter the creator economy is that they have to have 10 million followers, that they can only make money through click and view ad deals or brand sponsorships. And yes, that's a section of the creator economy, but increasingly commerce, and most notably purchases, subscriptions, and donations, and other kinds of individual pieces of commerce that the artist is able to create between themselves and their community is going to be the mainstay of the creator economy. Advertising helps, there's no question about it. But just ask anybody who's in the ad economy right now. It sucks. It's terrible. Ad impressions are commodified to the point where they're almost unsellable unless you're a mass platform. And unless you're Mr. Beast or one of those types of creators, it's going to be very difficult to make a living off of ad dollars and brand deals. However, if you can figure out who your community is and why they love what you do, no matter how big or small it is, you can then come up with an economic exchange that makes sense for both ends of that continuum.
I want to explore so much what you've just said, Evan, but I would like to start off with this. Ankur, I'm looking at some of the content from the proof copy of your book, and you've got quite a distinct articulation of what an influencer is as well. Mm-hmm. How does that contrast with the perspective that Evan has just shared on, influencers and what they have been or what they are now? What's your perspective?
Well, for me, when I look at the creators and influencers, see, these are developing terms, and obviously there are various interpretations to how you look at it. The way I'm looking at it is that the difference between the creators and the influencers is the difference of intent. So if the intent is to drive, let's say, mass knowledge or mass information, or the intent is to just drive awareness, it's the creators who do that the best. When the intent changes from driving awareness to actually doing the action, or the action of buying, or doing that, or driving basically a movement, that is done through the influencer. So if you look at the typical sales, the sales pipeline of the earlier times, when you talk about the sales funnel and all, attention, interest, and desire is kind of driven by the creators, and the action is driven by the influencers. Now, it's not to say that it's different. Like, creators can be influencers also, and all influencers can be creators too. So it's not like it's like sitting in a house with two different rooms. People can walk in from one room to the other, and from the other to the first. So it's not like they are distinct or they are not overlapping. I think there's a very clear overlap between creators and influencers, and it's sort of interchangeable. And if you're driving action, then you are an influencer. If you're driving awareness, then you are a creator, and either can be either. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair distinction. I think that they are kind of adjacent rooms, or annexes of the same building. But I do think, so I am an influencer on LinkedIn. There's no question about it. I pride myself on being one of the earliest LinkedIn influencers. However, that is different from the Substack newsletter that I write called Media War and Peace, which you can subscribe to right now. I'll wait. But they are halves of the same whole to a certain extent. So I use my influence on LinkedIn to drive conversation and then steer traffic to my newsletter. But there's a much larger enterprise that sits underneath all of that, which is the LinkedIn feed is influence. The Substack newsletter is creative, is content. And then underneath that sits this large enterprise where I get hired to offer bespoke pieces of content to clients, whether that's thought leadership, which is another form of influence, although I think it's where influencers and creators meet and meld in thought leadership. But then there's also consultation, where I'm asked to take my intellectual property and tailor it to a specific client. Take Jake Paul, someone who I love to hate, right? I mean, he's just awful. He's a terrible person, arguably a toxic personality. And yet he is a perfect, I think, case study for the continuum of influencer to creator. He started as an influencer. He and his brother started as influencers, but now he is distinctly a creator. He is fighting Mike Tyson on Netflix for $20 million in a couple of days. He has his own cosmetics line. He has his own energy drink. Like, he is a creator in perfect form. Emma Chamberlain is another one who started as an influencer and then became a creator. She has a coffee company. She has a podcast. Tom Papa, Bert Kreischer. These are people who maybe they have influence on social media, but in the end, they're comedians and they make content. And so they're creators first. So there is a distinction between them. Increasingly, the revenue streams will seem similar, but it's really a matter of how you want to position what you make at the end of the day.
Yeah, now I'll just say, like, sorry, I was just going to say something, Chris. I feel like also, so there are a lot of those offline influencers as well, right? People who are, let's say, celebrities in movies or whatever, and they're not on social media, but they typically just come on social when the movie is about to release. They basically just try and generate that sort of a buzz around the movie time, or around whatever they are trying to sell. If it's an author, maybe a book or whatever. But otherwise, they are just influencers in the offline world. I find that a lot of times influencers may or may not be creators, but I feel like most of the creators, if you are a creator, if you are creating some sort of content and all, you tend to become an influencer over time. It could be a niche influencer if you have like, to what Evan's point was earlier, if you are it's just not a game of just mopping up numbers in terms of follower growth and all, but if you are influencer who's selling, if you're a creator who's making content on a niche product line or a niche area of content, then you're an influencer in that space itself for that particular audience that you're working for. So I think, the lines are blurry, but they are definitely distinct as well at the same time, it seems.
Evan, you used the word enterprise, which is a word that resonates with me when we're talking about this whole ecosystem, because, number one, some of the connotations of that word are around business or revenue generation. But another characteristic of that is typically an ecosystem of various processes and platforms, etc., that form the cascade of how that money is generated. You mentioned LinkedIn, you mentioned Substack, you mentioned the bespoke consulting engagements and speaking engagements that you do. What do you think, Evan, when it comes to that being potentially one of the hallmarks to watch out for when it comes to whether or not somebody is a creator and has taken the time to craft that stack of things that allow them to exist at various symbiotic levels that ultimately throw the pennies to the bottom line? Or is an influencer somebody that typically just operates at the surface level of that, an Instagram or
I don't think we should get too lost in the nuance between the two, because they are very similar. Even influencers wake up every day and make content. I mean, it's the only reason to stay current and relevant as an influencer is if you're waking up every day, literally, and putting stuff out into the world. I think the major difference between the two is influencers are basically paid for their influence by brands, whereas creators wake up every day and make shit because they want to, and then have to create an enterprise, create a business around the art or the content they want to make. Those are the differences between the two. One is paid to make content, the other makes content and has to figure out how to get paid. But I think what's increasingly important is more and more people from mainstream media are crossing over to Ankur's part and doing both. Reese Witherspoon is somebody I very much take as a case study. The whole reason she was able to sell her company, Hello Sunshine, for $1 billion was because she had a creator economy enterprise at the heart of it, which is her email, book club that basically has the power to turn any book into a bestseller. And then she owns the rights and turns it into a movie or a television show, which she then sells at great profit to the gatekeeper economy. Like, she's the perfect example. But Dave Beckham is another really, really, really good example. He started as a soccer player, creator, then became an influencer, because what does he do now other than look pretty and go on the internet with his very pretty family? But then he was able to turn that footprint into an amazing production company and brand portfolio that is incredibly profitable for him. So he uses his influence to create content, which then generates income apart from his influence. Trixie Mattel started on RuPaul's Drag Race and has turned that into an influencer business, which is now a hotel and a bar and their own production company. I can go on and on and on. Ryan Codney started at 4 years old making videos on the internet. He now has an enormous production company called Sunlight Entertainment with his family that self-released their own film. Self-produced, self-financed, and self-released their own film this past summer. So, large and small, I think influence and creation intertwine. The difference is, do I want to stand in front of a ring light and take money from brands as a living? Or do I want to create content and figure out a way to use my influence to sell my content to, whether it's individuals or communities or brands, whatever it is? The news arena is now the biggest and I think best case study for this. Ben Smith, who now has Semaphore, Barry Weiss, who has her own enterprise, the news agents in the UK who left mainstream news in the UK and started their own podcast and now have their own platform to speak from. It's increasingly every kind of creator, whether you're a writer, a director, a performer, a comedian, a musician. If you don't learn how to turn your art into its own creator enterprise, you're going to be leaving most of the money and most of the opportunity that's in front of you for the next decade on the table.